When Holden Baxter chose the one woman every soul in Copper Ridge deemed cursed, he had no notion that her kiss would drain his fortune faster than water through cracked leather, or that losing everything would be the first step toward finding what he'd been searching for his whole life. The morning sun cast long shadows across the dusty main street of Copper Ridge when Holden Baxter made the decision that would either save him or damn him completely. Standing 6 feet tall in his finest black suit, silver watch chain gleaming against his vest, he possessed the kind of wealth that made lesser men tip their hats and women flutter like moths to flame. His cattle ranch stretched beyond 3 horizons. His bank account could weather any storm, and his name carried weight from Colorado to California. Yet prosperity had carved hollows beneath his steel-gray eyes. "You certain about this, Holden?" Sheriff Gideon Rowe scratched his graying beard, eyeing the marriage contract spread across the saloon table. "Anna East Covington ain't exactly conventional." Holden's jaw tightened. Through the grimy window, he could see her, Anna East, sweeping the steps of the boarding house with methodical precision. Auburn hair caught fire in the sunlight, tumbling past shoulders that bore the weight of a town's whispered condemnations. She moved like music given form, graceful despite the coarse brown dress that marked her as one of Copper Ridge's forgotten conventionals. "Overrated," Holden murmured, signing his name with a flourish. The truth cut deeper than he cared to admit. 3 previous engagements had crumbled like autumn leaves. Miss Sylvie Navarro, the banker's daughter, had fled to San Francisco after a mysterious fire consumed her family's stable the day after accepting his proposal. Miss Thea Harmon, the preacher's niece, had taken sudden ill with a fever that lasted precisely until she boarded the eastbound stage. And Miss Zuri Vaughn, well, her father's sudden business failures had convinced the whole family to relocate to Oregon Territory with suspicious haste. "Jinx," the townspeople whispered when they thought he couldn't hear. "That Baxter boy's cursed when it comes to love." But they had it backwards, didn't they? The curse wasn't his, it was hers. Anna East Covington had arrived in Copper Ridge 3 years prior, stepping off the afternoon stage with nothing but a worn carpetbag and eyes the color of winter storms. Within a month, old Henrik's general store had burned to the ground. By Christmas, the cattle epidemic had claimed half the local herds. Come spring, the mine shaft had collapsed, trapping 6 men for 3 desperate days. Coincidence, the rational folks said. But rational folks were scarce when superstition took root in desert soil. "She's pretty enough," admitted Royce Trenton, the saloon keeper, polishing a glass with unusual vigor. "But pretty don't override bad luck, son. That woman's got more hexes trailing her than a traveling preacher's got sermons." Holden's fingers traced the marriage contract's edge. Perhaps that was precisely why he needed her. Every blessed thing in his life had come too easily. Inherited land, multiplying wealth, respect he'd never earned. What was a man worth when everything turned to gold at his touch? When every woman saw dollar signs instead of his soul? "Maybe it's time I discovered what I'm made of without all this." He gestured toward his reflection in the window. Expensive clothes, polished boots. The comfortable arrogance of a man who'd never known want. Outside, Anna East paused in her sweeping, lifting her gaze toward the saloon. For one electric moment, their eyes met through the glass. Hers widened with something between surprise and recognition, as if she could see straight through to the restless ache he'd carried since boyhood. Then she ducked her head and resumed her work, but not before he caught the flush creeping up her slender neck. "I'll speak with her tonight," Holden decided, folding the contract and tucking it inside his vest pocket. "Your funeral," Gideon muttered, but his weathered face held a glimmer of something that might have been respect. The afternoon stretched like taffy, each minute crawling by as Holden attended to ranch business with half his attention. His foreman, Malachi Shaw, noticed his distraction immediately. "Boss, you're wound tighter than a $2 watch," Malachi observed, adjusting his hat against the relentless sun. "That red-headed gal got you thinking sideways." "Something like that." Holden's horse shifted beneath him, sensing his rider's restless energy. Below them, his prized cattle grazed in emerald pastures fed by the sweetest water this side of paradise. Everything he could see belonged to him, yet it all felt as substantial as morning mist. "Well, I'll say this, she's got sand." Watched her chase off 3 drunk cowboys last week with nothing but a broom and some choice words that would make a sailor blush. As evening painted the sky in shades of amber and rose, Holden found himself standing outside the boarding house, heart hammering against his ribs like a caged bird. The widow Phoenix Chandler who ran the establishment emerged onto the porch, her knowing smile sharp as a blade. "Evening, Mr. Baxter. Come calling, have we? I'd like to speak with Miss Covington, if she's available." Phoenix's laugh held no humor. "Oh, she's available all right. Question is whether you're prepared for what comes next." The door opened before he could ask what she meant, and there stood Anais, transformed by twilight into something ethereal and dangerous. She'd changed from her work dress into something simple but clean, deep blue cotton that made her eyes appear almost violet in the lamplight. Her hair hung loose around her shoulders, and for a moment, Holden forgot how to breathe. "Mr. Baxter." Her voice carried the hint of an accent he couldn't place, something refined, cultured, at odds with her circumstances. "Mrs. Chandler said you wished to speak with me." "I do." His throat felt parched as summer earth. "Perhaps we could walk?" She hesitated, glancing toward the shadows where he knew curious ears were straining to catch every word. "I suppose that would be acceptable." They walked in silence toward the edge of town, where the desert opened like a vast book written in stars. Their footsteps crunched on gravel, the only sound besides the distant lowing of cattle and the whisper of wind through sagebrush. "You know what they say about me," Anais said finally, her words more statement than question. "I know what they say about us both." She turned to study his profile in the moonlight. "And yet here you are. Here I am." A coyote's cry split the darkness, lonely and wild, and Anais wrapped her arms around herself despite the evening's warmth. "Why, Mr. Baxter? You could have any woman in 3 counties. Why seek out the one they call cursed?" Holden stopped walking, turning to face her fully. In the silver light, she looked like something conjured from dreams and desperate prayers. "Maybe because I'm tired of things coming easy. Maybe because I need to know who I am when everything I've built gets stripped away. And if I truly am what they say, if marrying me costs you everything you've worked for, then I'll find out what I'm worth when the gold's gone." For a long moment, she simply stared at him, searching his face for deception or jest. Finding neither, her expression softened into something almost vulnerable. "You're either the bravest man I've ever met," she whispered, "or the most foolish. Maybe both." But before she could respond, the thunder of approaching hoofbeats shattered the desert's peace, and Holden's hand instinctively moved toward the gun at his hip, because in the distance, 3 riders approached at a pace that spoke of nothing but trouble, and the moonlight glinted off something metallic in the lead rider's hand. The riders materialized from the darkness like harbingers of judgment, their horses' hooves pounding, a rhythm that matched Holden's suddenly racing heartbeat. As they drew closer, moonlight revealed 3 men he recognized, and one he wished he didn't. Well, well," drawled the lead rider, reining his black stallion to a halt mere yards away. "Holden Baxter, out courting the witch of Copper Ridge." Gideon Rowe flanked the speaker's left, his sheriff's badge catching starlight, while young Deputy Marcus Webb rode nervous circles on the right. But it was the man in the center who commanded attention, tall, lean, with silver threading his dark hair and eyes like chips of winter ice, Judge Cornelius Blackwood. Anais's passed walking upright in polished boots and a black coat that seemed to swallow light. "Judge." Holden's voice remained steady, though his hand never strayed far from his Colt. "Bit late for a social call, isn't it?" Blackwood's smile held all the warmth of a snake's belly. Never too late to protect an old friend from making a catastrophic mistake. His gaze shifted to Anais, who had gone statue still beside Holden. "Hello, my dear. You're looking well." Judge Blackwood. Anais's words emerged barely above a whisper, but Holden caught the tremor beneath them. "I thought you were in Denver." "Was. Business brought me back." He dismounted with fluid grace, his boots crunching on desert stone. "Imagine my surprise when I heard about young Baxter's intentions." Gideon shifted uncomfortably in his saddle. "Now, Judge, we're just here to make sure everything's proper like. No need for trouble." "Trouble?" Blackwood's laugh scraped like iron on stone. "Sheriff, the only trouble here is this sweet girl's unfortunate habit of leaving destruction in her wake." He stepped closer, and Anais retreated until her back pressed against Holden's chest. Tell him, Anais. Tell Mr. Baxter about Chicago. The word hit like a physical blow. Anais's sharp intake of breath told Holden everything he needed to know. There were secrets here, buried deep as winter roots. That's enough, Holden said, moving to shield Anais with his body. Whatever business you have with Miss Covington can wait until proper daylight hours. Can it? Blackwood's eyes glittered with malicious amusement. Even if that business concerns a dead husband? A mansion reduced to ash? A fortune that vanished overnight? The desert held its breath. Even the coyotes had fallen silent, as if sensing the danger crackling between the four humans like electricity before a storm. Lies. Anais breathed, but her voice lacked conviction. Are they? Blackwood produced a folded document from his coat. Marriage certificate. Mr. and Mrs. Edmund Covington, wed in Chicago, June of 1871. Pity about the fire 3 months later. Pity about poor Edmund's accident. Holden felt Anais tremble against him, her warmth seeping through his shirt like morning sun. But her trembling wasn't fear. It was rage, pure and incandescent. You bastard, she hissed, stepping around Holden to face her tormentor. Edmund died, saving those children from the tenement fire. You know that, do I? All I know is that every man who gets close to you ends up dead or ruined. Your father's shipping empire, gone. Your first fiancé, thrown from his horse the day before the wedding. Edmund, burned alive trying to play hero. Blackwood's smile turned predatory. Shall I continue? That's plenty. Holden's voice cut through the night like a blade, cold and sharp enough to draw blood. I don't know what grudge you're nursing, Judge, but it ends here. Grudge. Blackwood laughed, but the sound held no mirth. Son, I'm trying to save your life. This woman is poison in a pretty bottle. Death follows her like shadow follows light. Then, maybe death, and I need to have a conversation. The words hung in the air like gunpowder smoke. Gideon's horse danced sideways, sensing its rider's tension, while young Webb's hand drifted toward his weapon. Holden, no. Anais caught his arm, her fingers surprisingly strong. He's not worth it. But Blackwood had already dismissed the threat, turning his attention back to the woman who'd captured Holden's heart. Tell me, dear Anais, have you shared the full extent of your talents with your intended? Does he know about the dreams? The way things bend and break around you when your emotions run hot. A wind that hadn't existed moments before began to stir the desert sage, carrying with it the scent of rain despite the cloudless sky. Holden felt it first as a prickle along his arms, then as a deeper awareness, something otherworldly moving through the darkness like a living thing. Stop, Anais whispered, but whether to Blackwood or the strange energy building around them, Holden couldn't tell. Show him, Blackwood taunted, his voice rising above the growing wind. Show him what you really are. The desert erupted, sand and stone whirled upward in spiraling columns, and Holden staggered as the ground beneath his feet began to vibrate like a struck bell. The horses screamed, rearing and fighting their riders' control, while the wind howled with voices that seemed almost human. The center of it all stood Anais, her hair whipping around her face like tongues of fire, her eyes reflecting starlight, in a way that spoke of depths no mortal should possess. She raised her hands as if to calm the storm, but instead seemed to command it, bending nature itself to her will. Enough, she cried, and everything stopped. The wind died. The sand settled. The desert returned to its ancient silence, leaving only the sound of labored breathing and frightened horses. Blackwood's triumphant smile had vanished, replaced by something that might have been fear. Even Gideon sat slack-jawed in his saddle, his weathered face pale as old bone. But Holden stepped forward. Anais. Her name on his lips sounded like a prayer, soft and reverent. Look at me. She turned, tears streaming down her cheeks, her whole body shaking with exhaustion or terror, perhaps both. Now you know, she whispered. Now you understand why they call me cursed. No. He reached out, cupping her face in his hands with infinite gentleness. Now I understand why they're afraid. Her eyes widened, searching his face for revulsion, for the horror she'd grown accustomed to seeing. Instead, she found wonder. You're not running, she breathed. Should I be? Before she could answer, Blackwood's voice sliced through the moment like a blade. Touching, truly. But this changes nothing, Baxter. That woman is dangerous. To you, to this town, to everyone she touches. Mark my words. Marry her, and you'll rue the day you were born. He remounted his horse with sharp, angry movements. This isn't over, Anais. Not by a long shot. The three riders thundered away, leaving only dust and the echo of hoofbeats. But, as their sounds faded into the distance, Holden became aware of something else. A low rumbling from the direction of his ranch, accompanied by the orange glow of flames painting the horizon. Anais followed his gaze, her face crumpling with fresh despair. It's already starting, she whispered. The curse is already working. But when they reached the burning barn, they discovered the fire wasn't the beginning of his destruction. It was a message, and painted in ash on the remaining wall were three words that changed everything. She is mine. The acrid smell of smoke and charred wood filled Holden's lungs as he stared at the message burned into what remained of his prized thoroughbred barn. Three words that seemed to pulse with malevolent life in the dying firelight. She is mine. This is my fault, Anais whispered, her voice breaking like glass against stone. I should have left town the moment I felt him coming. Him. Holden turned from the smoldering ruins, catching the terror in her storm-gray eyes. You know who did this? Before she could answer, Malachi Shaw came running through the smoke, his face streaked with soot and grim determination. Boss, thank God you're alive. Lost 6 horses, but we managed to save the rest. Found this nailed to the water trough. He handed Holden a piece of parchment that felt wrong somehow. Too smooth, too cold, as if it had never known warmth. The writing appeared to shift in the firelight, elegant script that seemed to move when he wasn't looking directly at it. 24 hours, my dear Anais. Come to me willingly, or I'll take what pleasure I can in destroying everything he holds dear. You know where to find me. You've always known. Your devoted servant, Gabriel. The name escaped Anais's lips like a prayer whispered backwards. She swayed on her feet, and Holden caught her before she could fall. Easy there, darling. Who is Gabriel? Her laugh held no humor, only bitter recognition. It's complicated. Complicated. How? But even as Holden asked, he was beginning to understand. The supernatural windstorm. The way reality seemed to bend around her emotions. The pattern of destruction that followed her wherever she went. He's not human, she said simply. Hasn't been for a very long time. Malachi spat tobacco juice into the dirt, his weathered face skeptical. Now, miss, I know you're upset, but, nothing. Anais straightened, steel entering her voice. Gabriel Mordecai was my husband's business partner in Chicago. Was also the thing that killed him. The desert wind stirred the ashes at their feet, and Holden could swear he heard laughter carried on the night air. Low, masculine, utterly devoid of warmth. Start from the beginning, Holden said, leading her away from the smoking ruins toward the main house. Tell me everything. They settled on the porch swing, Malachi standing guard with his rifle while Anais gathered the courage to speak truths she'd buried for 3 years. My maiden name was Delacroix, she began, her voice steady now, resigned. My father owned the largest shipping company on the Great Lakes. We had everything, wealth, position, respect. But it wasn't enough for him. He wanted more. More how? Immortality. Power beyond human understanding. So he made a deal. Her hands twisted in her lap, like captured birds. There are things that live in the spaces between worlds, Holden. Ancient things that feed on human suffering and despair. My father summoned one, bound it with contracts written in blood and starlight. Malachi muttered something that sounded like a prayer, but his grip on the rifle never wavered. The entity took the name Gabriel Mordecai when it walked among us. Anais continued. Handsome as sin, charming as spring rain, with eyes like black diamonds and a smile that could make angels weep. My father introduced him as his new business partner, and God help me, I was fascinated. You loved him, Holden said, though the words felt like swallowing ground glass. I thought I did. He was everything a young woman dreams of, sophisticated, worldly, devoted. But Gabriel's attention came with a price I didn't understand until it was too late. She touched her throat, and Holden caught a glimpse of scarred flesh beneath her collar. The binding wasn't just between my father and Gabriel. It included me, made me his anchor to this world, his battery, you might say. Battery. My emotions, my life force, they feed him. The stronger I feel, the more powerful he becomes. That's why tragedy follows me, Holden. Every time I care about someone, every time I feel joy or love or hope, Gabriel grows stronger. And the stronger he becomes, the more he can manipulate reality around me. The pieces clicked into place like bullets sliding into a chamber. The accidents, the fires, the men who died or fled. All Gabriel's work. He's been hunting me since Chicago, leaving destruction in his wake, making sure I could never settle anywhere long enough to find peace or love. Holden was quiet for a long moment, processing revelations that would have sent most men running for the nearest bottle of whiskey and a fast horse. But Holden Baxter had never been most men. So what changed? He asked finally. Why is he making his move now? Anaisa's smile held equal parts sorrow and wonder. You changed, Holden. When you looked at me tonight, really looked at me, not as a curse or a victim, but as a woman worth choosing, something shifted. The binding weakened. For the first time in 3 years, I felt free. And that scared him, terrified him. Without me as his anchor, Gabriel will eventually fade back to whatever dimension spawned him. But not without a fight. As if summoned by her words, the temperature around them plummeted 20 degrees in as many seconds. Frost began forming on the porch railings despite the desert heat, and the stars overhead flickered like dying candles. He's coming, Anais breathed, rising from the swing with supernatural grace. I can feel him pulling at the edges of reality, searching for a way through. The air itself began to shimmer, like heat waves rising from summer stone, and a figure materialized at the edge of the firelight. Tall and elegant in a way that spoke of old money and older power, Gabriel Mordecai stepped into their world as casually as a man might enter his own parlor. "Hello, my dear," he said, his voice like honey poured over broken glass. "You've led me quite a chase." He was everything Anais had described and more. Beautiful in the way predators are beautiful, with sharp cheekbones and black hair swept back from a face that belonged in Renaissance paintings. His clothes were impeccable, his bearing aristocratic. But his eyes held depths that spoke of centuries and hungers no mortal should ever contemplate. Gabriel. Anais stepped in front of Holden, as if her small frame could shield him from the approaching storm. "Leave him out of this. Your quarrel is with me." "Oh, but it's not, you see." Gabriel's smile revealed teeth too white and too sharp. "My quarrel is with anyone who would steal what belongs to me. And you, Anais Delacroix, have belonged to me since the day your father signed our contract in his own blood." "Her name is Covington," Holden said, rising to his full height. "And she doesn't belong to anyone." Gabriel's attention shifted to him with the weight of winter storm clouds. "Ah, the cattle baron. How wonderfully rustic. Tell me, Mr. Baxter, do you know what your beloved's kiss can do? Has she shown you her true gift?" "Gabriel, don't." But the demon's laughter cut through her protest like a blade through silk. "One kiss from those sweet lips, and everything you've built will crumble to dust. Your fortune, your land, your cattle, all of it will flow to me, through her, just as it did with poor Edmund, just as it did with her father." Holden felt the world tilt beneath his feet. "Is it true?" Anais's silence was answer enough. "The binding works both ways, you see," Gabriel continued, clearly enjoying himself. "She takes from those who love her, and I take from her. It's really quite elegant. Every kiss a theft, every caress a contract signed in passion and sealed with ruin." The demon stepped closer, his form becoming more solid, more real, with each passing second. "So here's my offer. Cowboy, walk away. Leave my property to me, and I'll let you keep your pretty ranch and your comfortable life. Stay and watch everything you've ever cared about burn." But before Holden could answer, a gunshot cracked across the desert, and Gabriel Mordecai smiled as the bullet passed harmlessly through his chest like smoke through spiders silked up Malachi's. Face went white as his bullet passed through Gabriel's chest without leaving so much as a mark. The demon's laughter echoed across the desert like church bells rung in reverse. Beautiful and terrible and utterly wrong. Iron and lead. Gabriel sked, brushing imaginary dust from his impeccable black coat. How charmingly primitive. You might as well try to stop the wind with your bare hands. But Holden was already moving, his mind racing through possibilities, as he stepped between Anais and the supernatural threat. If bullets won't work, what will? Nothing, Gabriel purred, his form becoming more solid with each passing moment. Around them, the desert began to change, sagebrush withering to ash, the very ground cracking like dried leather. I am eternal, Mr. Baxter. I have fed on human suffering since before your civilization learned to scratch marks on cave walls. There has to be a way, Anais whispered, her hands crackling with that same otherworldly energy Holden had witnessed earlier. Every binding has conditions, Gabriel. You taught me that yourself. The demon's smile faltered for just an instant, but it was enough. Holden caught the flicker of uncertainty, the brief tightening around those fathomless eyes. Clever girl, Gabriel murmured. But even if you could break our contract, the cost would destroy you. The binding isn't just magical, sweet Anais. It's woven into your very soul. Sever it, and you sever yourself from life itself. Maybe, she said, lifting her chin with defiant grace. But at least I die free. The words hit Holden like a physical blow. No, there has to be another way. There is, said a new voice from the darkness, crisp and authoritative. Judge Blackwood emerged from the shadows, but he wasn't alone. Sheriff Gideon Rowe flanked his left, while a figure Holden didn't recognize brought up the rear, a woman in traveling clothes with silver hair and eyes that seemed to hold starlight. Judge, Gabriel's voice dropped 20 degrees. How good of you to join us. Though I must say, your timing is impeccable as always. Blackwood's weathered face held grim satisfaction. Hello, old friend. Still playing with humans like a cat with mice, I see. Old friend. Resolution crashed over Holden like a cold wave. You know each other. Oh, we go way back, Gabriel said, his attention never leaving the newcomers. Don't we, Cornelius? Or do you prefer Judge these days? So much more dignified than failed occultist. The silver-haired woman stepped forward, and Holden felt power radiating from her like heat from forged coals. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of ancient authority. Gabriel Mordecai, she said, each word precise as a blade stroke. By the laws that govern your kind, you have overreached. The binding you claim is fraudulent. Gabriel's human mask slipped for just a moment, revealing something with too many teeth and eyes like burning coals. Evangeline Cross. I should have known the order would send their best hunter. The binding requires willing consent from all parties, Evangeline continued, producing a leather-bound tome from her satchel. Anais Delacroix was 17 when her father signed your contract. Under both human and supernatural law, she was too young to consent to such terms. A technicality, Gabriel snarled, but uncertainty crept into his voice. More than that, a complete invalidation of your claim. Evangeline's eyes found Anais's across the darkness. Child, you were never truly bound to him. Your father's guilt and Gabriel's manipulation made you believe you were, but the contract is worthless parchment. Anais staggered as if struck. That's impossible. The deaths, the destruction, all Gabriel's doing, using your grief and guilt as a focus. He's been feeding on your despair for 3 years, growing stronger while making you believe it was your fault. Evangeline's voice gentled. The power you carry isn't cursed, dear one. It's a gift, one that was perverted by this creature's lies. Gabriel's form began to waver like smoke, his perfect features distorting with rage. Lies. She is mine by right of nothing, Blackwood interrupted, stepping beside Evangeline. I made a deal with you 20 years ago, Gabriel. Helped you cross over in exchange for knowledge and power. But I also learned your weaknesses. The temperature plummeted again, frost forming on their breath as Gabriel's fury manifested in the physical world. The ground beneath their feet cracked and heaved, and in the distance, Holden could hear his cattle lowing in terror. You think, your little band of mortals can stand against me? Gabriel's voice became layered, harmonizing with itself in ways that hurt to hear. I have fed well these past years. I am stronger than I have ever been. But you're also more solid, Evangeline said with grim satisfaction. More real, more vulnerable. She began to chant in a language that predated English by millennia, her words weaving through the air like silver threads. Gabriel shrieked, an inhuman sound that shattered windows in the ranch house and set the horses screaming in their corrals. Anais, Holden shouted over the supernatural din, "Whatever you're going to do it now." She looked at him across the chaos, her eyes bright, with tears and terrible understanding. "If I use my power to help banish him, the backlash could kill me. And if you don't, he'll destroy everything anyway." For a heartbeat that lasted an eternity, their gazes locked across the space between them. In her storm-gray eyes, Holden saw a lifetime of loneliness, a heart that had been taught to fear its own capacity for love. But beneath the fear, he saw something else. Hope, fragile as spring ice but burning bright as desert stars. "I love you," she said, the words clear despite the supernatural storm raging around them. "I love you too," he replied, meaning it with every fiber of his being. "Now save us all." Anais raised her hands, and the desert responded. But this time, instead of the chaotic windstorm from earlier, her power flowed like music made manifest. Sand rose in spiraling patterns, forming protective barriers around the mortals while channeling Evangeline's banishment spell into something far more potent. Gabriel's scream shook the foundations of reality itself. "No, she is mine. The contract is void," Evangeline shouted, her own power joining with Anais's in a crescendo that lit the night sky. "By law and by right, I banish you back to the void that spawned you." The demon's form began to dissolve, his perfect features melting like wax and flame. But even as he faded, his eyes remained fixed on Anais with malevolent promise. "This isn't over," he hissed, his voice growing distant. "I will find another way. I will." His words cut off as reality snapped back like a released bowstring. The supernatural storm died, the frost melted, and blessed silence fell over the desert. For a moment, no one moved. Then Anais collapsed. Holden caught her before she hit the ground, cradling her against his chest as her breathing grew shallow and labored. Her skin was pale as moonlight, her pulse fluttering like a trapped bird. "The backlash," Evangeline said grimly, kneeling beside them. "Using that much power to banish a creature of Gabriel's strength. Her mortal body can't sustain it. There has to be something," Holden said desperately, brushing auburn hair from Anais's fevered brow. "Some way to save her." Evangeline's expression was compassionate but resigned. "I'm sorry. The only thing that might anchor her spirit to this world would be a connection strong enough to overcome the supernatural drain. Love deeper than magic, bonds forged in." But her words were lost as Anais's eyes fluttered open, her lips parting. With desperate urgency, "Kiss me," she whispered. "Before it's too late. Kiss me like you mean it, even if it costs you everything." Time crystallized around them like amber preserving a perfect moment. Anais lay dying in his arms, her breath coming in shallow gasps that spoke of a spirit preparing to slip its mortal bonds. Evangeline's warning echoed in Holden's mind. One kiss might save her, or it might drain everything he'd ever worked for, just as Gabriel had promised. "Holden," Anais whispered, her voice barely audible above the desert wind. "Don't. I won't be the reason you lose everything. You already are everything," he said simply and kissed her. The moment their lips met, the world exploded into sensation. Light poured from the point of contact, not harsh or blinding, but warm as summer sunrise, golden as wheat fields dancing in prairie wind. Holden felt something flow between them, but instead of the draining sensation Gabriel had threatened, it felt like completion, like two halves of a whole finally finding each other. Power surged through them both, not the chaotic energy of Anais's desperate magic, but something clean and pure and infinitely renewable. Around them, the desert began to bloom. Sagebrush straightened and grew lush. Wildflowers burst from cracked earth in cascades of purple and gold. Even the charred remains of the barn showed green shoots pushing through the ash. When they finally broke apart, Anais's eyes were bright with health and wonder. "I'm alive," she breathed. "I can feel it. Gabriel's influence is completely gone." "But how?" Evangeline stood nearby, her weathered face soft with amazement. "True love," she said simply. "Not the desperate passion that Gabriel fed on, but love, freely given, without condition or expectation of return. It's the one force in all the worlds that can't be corrupted or claimed. Judge Blackwood approached them, his stern expression transformed by something approaching wonder. I've studied the supernatural for 40 years, he said quietly. Seen magic that could level mountains and spells that could raise the dead. But I've never witnessed anything like that. What exactly did we witness? Gideon asked, removing his hat to scratch his graying head. A new beginning, Evangeline replied. When two souls connect that purely, that completely, they create something greater than the sum of their parts. Gabriel could drain individual wealth, individual power, but he could never touch what they've built together. Holden helped Anais to her feet, marveling at the change in her. The haunted look that had shadowed her storm-gray eyes was gone, replaced by peace he'd never seen there before. More than that, she seemed to glow from within, as if starlight had taken residence beneath her skin. Your ranch, she said suddenly, concern creeping into her voice. The cattle, the land, did the kiss. Look around, darling. She turned, and her breath caught. Where his prize cattle had grazed before, twice as many now dotted the valley, their coats gleaming with health. The pastures stretched further than they had that morning, rich grass extending to horizons that seemed impossibly distant. The ranch house itself stood larger and more elegant, as if prosperity had touched every board and beam. It's like your wealth doubled, Malachi said, in wonder, staring at the transformed landscape. No, tripled. Maybe more. Not doubled. Holden realized, understanding flooding through him like dawn breaking. Shared. Everything I had, everything she had, it all became ours. Evangeline nodded approvingly. Gabriel's binding worked by stealing from one to feed another. But true partnership multiplies rather than divides. When you chose to share everything, including the risk of losing it, you created something he never could have anticipated. So what happens now? Anais asked, her hand finding Holden's with natural ease. Gabriel is banished, but entities like him don't give up easily. Now you learn to use your gift properly, Evangeline said, producing a small leather journal from her satchel. Your power was never meant to bring destruction, child. It's a force for growth, for healing, for making things better than they were. This contains everything my order has learned about channeling such abilities safely. Judge Blackwood cleared his throat. There's also the matter of making things legal and proper. I may not be the most conventional officiant, but I am empowered to perform marriages in this territory. Holden turned to Anais, his heart hammering against his ribs. I know this isn't exactly traditional, proposing after we've already shared magical vows with the universe. Yes, she said simply, her smile bright enough to shame the stars. I haven't asked yet. You don't need to. The answer is yes. It's always been yes. It just took me 3 years to believe I deserved happiness. The wedding that followed was unlike anything Copper Ridge had ever seen. Word spread quickly through town, as word tends to do in small places, and by sunset, half the population had gathered at the ranch. They came expecting to witness either a miracle or a disaster. But what they found was simply love. As Judge Blackwood spoke the ancient words that would bind them legally as well as mystically. The desert continued its impossible blooming. Night flowering. Sirius opened their pristine petals to the moon, releasing perfume that spoke of promises kept and dreams fulfilled. Do you, Holden Baxter, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife, in sickness and in health, in prosperity and want, for as long as you both shall live? I do, Holden said, his voice carrying across the gathered crowd. And longer than that, if such things are possible. And do you, Anais Covington, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband, to love and cherish, in joy and sorrow, for as long as you both shall live? I do, she replied, tears of happiness tracking silver down her cheeks. With everything I am and everything I'll become. Then by the power vested in me by the territory of Colorado, and witnessed by forces both mortal and eternal, I pronounce you husband and wife. Son, you may kiss your bride. This time, when their lips met, the magic was gentler but no less profound. Light shimmered around them like heat waves, and every flower in the valley turned toward them as if they were twin suns. The crowd murmured in wonder, but Holden barely heard them. All his attention was focused on the woman in his arms, the partner who had chosen to share not just his wealth, But his soul, the celebration continued into the night, with Royce Trenton providing whiskey and Phoenix Chandler producing a wedding cake from seemingly nowhere. Holden and Anais slipped away to the porch swing where it had all begun. "No regrets?" he asked, pulling her close as they watched the desert continue its magical transformation. "Only one," she said, her head resting against his shoulder, his heart clenched. "What? I regret that it took us so long to find each other." The desert wind carried the scent of sage and possibility, of rain promised and prayers answered. Somewhere, in the distance, a coyote called to its mate, the sound joyful rather than lonesome. And on the porch of the most prosperous ranch in 3 territories, a man who had found his true wealth held the woman who had learned to trust and love. Behind them, the rose garden that had never existed before bloomed in the darkness, each flower a testament to the truth they discovered, that some things in this world are indeed magical, and the most powerful magic of all is 2 hearts choosing to beat as one. Well, partners, that's the tale of how a well-off cowboy chose the one woman no one else would have, and discovered that sometimes the greatest fortune comes from risking everything for love. If this story warmed your heart like a campfire on a cold night, don't forget to give it a like and subscribe for more tales from the wild frontier. Comment below and let us know where you're watching from today, whether you're in the bustling cities back east or the wide open spaces where legends are still being written.